What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and in today's video I'm going to be building an all NZXT gaming PC build featuring an RTX 3060 Ti. NZXT very kindly sent over their new Z590 motherboard. But wait, don't click off, this is an Intel build, but for good reason, which we'll come to a little bit later. As usual, I'm going to run you through all the components I selected and why, and put this system together from start right through to finish in today's video, before booting it up to see exactly how it performs in the biggest titles out there. Without any further ado though, let's dive into it. As usual, we're going to kick things off by installing as many components into the motherboard choice today as possible. This is NZXT's new N7 Z590 board in white. I think the colourway on this motherboard looks incredible, and it's crammed with features which we'll come onto in a second. But why have I gone for an Intel build today? Well, as much as we love AMD's new Ryzen 5 5600X, it's really expensive. Like, AMD have gone ahead and that price has, it's skyrocketed. Now, it is worth it for a lot of builds, but it's also worth considering the Intel options out there. The i5 11600K and 11600KF are actually some really great choices. Even Gamers Nexus said so, which has got to be saying something in 2021. Would I avoid the i7 and i9 chips like the plague? Sorry, Intel, but yes, I would. This 11600KF though is perhaps another story. With boost clock speeds that get close to the 5 GHz mark and 6 cores and 12 threads, as far as gaming goes, it ticks all the boxes. If you want to do a bit of streaming or video editing, it's also got you covered. Of course, a Ryzen 9 is always going to be a better choice for those really enthusiast applications. But if it's gaming you're after at a good value price point, then the i5 is the choice for you. And believe you me, I'm even more surprised than anybody to be recommending Intel as the price to performance best value option for a build, wow, ever really. Let's go ahead and install that CPU into this NZXT motherboard. Now, the next component we're going to install is the M.2 SSD storage. This is Samsung's brand new 980 Pro, and it's a Gen 4 NVMe drive. One of the features, which of course the Z590 board we've chosen today supports. Installing a drive like this into this NZXT motherboard is super simple. We just need to peel off these little stickers which stop the magnets from moving about in shipping, and just go ahead and pop the drive into place. One tip I've got for installing M.2 drives is to just pop them in at sort of a 45-degree angle, a little something like this, and then push them down into place. Use the teeny tiny included screw to secure the drive and make sure it doesn't go anywhere, and you are good to go. And with that done, it brings us nicely on to the RAM choice for today's system. This is a 32GB white kit, so matches the colour scheme of Corsair's Vengeance RGB Pro. They've recently released a Pro SL version as well, which is also worth considering, so I'll link those alongside these in the description below. With nice RGB up top as well and a white aesthetic, it's going to match today's colour scheme really quite nicely, and installs very easily into the second and the fourth RAM DIMM slots. Boom! And just like that, we're all done and we're ready to move the motherboard assembly, as we're going to call it, into the case choice for today's system. And this is NZXT's H510 Elite. This is a really exciting case choice for this build, as not only does it work really well in the colour scheme, it's also crammed with loads of features that you've come to know and love from NZXT chassis. This is actually one of the first NZXT cases I ever built in a recent B550 build, which you can find in the card section now. I was super impressed with it, and I'm really looking forward to using it once again for the colour scheme of today's system. So let's go ahead, get it out of the box, and see what it looks like. With any case, I recommend that you take off as many side panels as possible to begin with, which will make it that little bit easier to work with. So in our instance, we've just got the glass main tempered glass side panel, and then the rear steel panel as well, which is powder coated in this really lovely white colour. And once we've removed both of those, we can go ahead and slide the motherboard into place. This board has a built-in I/O shield, which is a really nice touch. Good to see this being done more and more often. And it does make lining the motherboard up that little bit easier, because all you need to do is just slide the motherboard into place and slot the rear I/O through the back panel before going ahead and securing the motherboard down with each of the 9 screw hole locations. 3 at the top, 3 in the middle, and 3 across the bottom. That is looking already pretty damn good. And it brings us nicely on to the next component on the hit list today, the CPU cooler. This is NZXT's Kraken X63. With this really nice infinite RGB water block design and NZXT's famous ring RGB fans, it should look pretty good. I'm going to mount the radiator at the front of the case and leverage the power of the existing 140mm RGB fans. We'll worry about putting it on the CPU afterwards, but let's install the radiator first off and take this one step at a time. This case has a really cool feature as well, with a tray that actually slides out with the fans on it and makes it easier to install a radiator, as you'll see on your screen now. So big brownie points to NZXT for that one, and making the process just that bit more manageable. With the radiator in, we're then just going to go ahead and secure these 4 posts onto each corner of our CPU socket, and then go ahead and use this included bracket to secure it all down into place. We'll sort the cables and the wiring and all that fun stuff out a little bit later. Looking pretty good in my book, and that moves us nicely on to the penultimate component of today's system, the power supply, before we finally go ahead and look at the graphics card. Now, much like GPU pricing in 2021, power supplies are a bit all over the place. Miners are buying them up for their crazy mining rigs, so sourcing a good power supply at a reasonable price is a bit more difficult than normal. This won't be a full cable and wiring guide, but if you'd like to see that in detail, check out our recent How to Build a Gaming PC tutorial in the cards section now. Let's go ahead, plug in the cables we're going to need, screw it into place, and then we can finally move on to the graphics card, which I know is the bit you're all waiting for. Lovely stuff, we're all wired up and ready to go. There's a couple of stray cables we'll deal with in a moment, but first it's time for the graphics card. Now this is Nvidia's RTX 3060 Ti Founders Edition. Now this actually aesthetically is going to really work for the system today. It's quite light in its colour, so it doesn't throw off our white and black colour scheme too much. I love the Founders design. Not only is it compact and small, but it packs a punch with some great factory boost clock speeds, a really nice backplate design, and a quiet cooler that takes the fight to some of the good AIB cards out there from MSI, Asus, GeekaWhat, and more. The card does feature Nvidia's really weird little mini power adapter. It would be good to see this kind of standard adopted longer term by big power supply brands, but until then, you've got to use this thing, which is really quite ugly. A bit of a kind of distraction really from a build, and a few points knocked off there for Nvidia. I do appreciate how hard these cards are to get hold of in 2021. Unfortunately, a perfect storm of crypto mining craze and of course all the COVID supply chain issues has made things that little bit more tricky. Keep your eyes peeled though and just try and pick up a 3060 Ti from any brand that you can find at a price you're comfortable with, because for 1440p and 1080p gaming, this thing is unparalleled. Support for ray tracing is better than ever before, but perhaps more impressively, DLSS and DLSS 2.0 allow you to supercharge your frame rate with a resolution scaler that's actually really, really good. We'll take a closer look into performance a bit later though, but Nvidia have done a great job with this card. I just wish they were that little bit easier to get hold of. Let's go ahead and install the graphics card though, and then do some of our cable management before booting this machine up to see how good it performs in some of the latest titles out there. But first, how good it looks when it's all powered up in typical GeekaWhat style, which can only mean one thing: roll the montage. Awesome stuff. Now we've seen how good this system looks when it's all powered up, let's now take a dive into performance and see just how it stacks up in the biggest titles out there. On your screen now, before that though, is a summary, a snapshot view of all the different games we tested out today with CPU and GPU temperature testing. If you'd like to see the full unedited gaming benchmark runs for any of these titles, check out the playlist in the cards section now on our benchmarking YouTube channel called Benched. For now though, let's take a closer look at some of these games, our focus titles today, and kick things off with GTA 5. In the game's inbuilt benchmarking mode at 1080p high settings, we got an impressive 133 FPS on average, with 126 and 117 for the 90 and the 99th percentile results. It was a similarly positive story in Apex Legends, where we also once again tested at 1080p high settings. Here we got 193 frames per second on average, with 163 and 130 for those 90 and 99th percentile results, having set the frame rate to unlimited in the Origin in-game launcher. Otherwise, Apex is going to be restricted to 140, so make sure you deal with that one. The next title we tested today was a bit of Valorant. Now here, at 1080p high settings, we got some incredible frame rates. The game is probably the easiest of the titles today to run, but it's still hugely popular, and with 375 FPS on average, you're not going to be disappointed. We tested out our frame rates using both Nvidia FrameView and MSI Afterburner's Reaver Tuner, which you'll see in the top left of your screen right about now. The brand new Call of Duty Warzone map is next up, and here we push the boat out. We tested it at 1440p. High settings across the board, and we got 111 FPS on average, with 99 and 91 for the 90 and 99th percentile results, meaning the game basically stayed above 100 frames a second pretty much the entire time, and visually it looked absolutely fantastic. We also gave Cyberpunk 2077 a go, but this time at 1080p rather than 1440p, as the game is still really difficult to run. At 1080p medium settings, we got a surprisingly high 85 frames a second on average, and visually the game looked great. We did leverage the power of Nvidia's DLSS, a great AI-backed resolution scaler, which gives you more frame rate, but didn't of course utilise ray tracing, as this would have really hammered the frame rate. Ray tracing in Cyberpunk does look great, but I'd recommend jumping up to a 3070 or a 3080 if you're intent on making that happen. Finally then, the last of the focus titles we tested out today was Fortnite. Here at 1080p low settings, we got 180 frames a second. And when I say low, I really mean competitive settings. This is where you tune all of the settings down to low, except the render distance, which you set to far. This allows you to see enemies as far into the distance as the game will allow you, while also getting the maximum frame rate possible, helping with reaction times and hopefully letting you secure that all-important W. And on that note, that pretty much wraps it up for not only the benchmark section today, but the whole video. If you enjoyed this one, you know what to do. Make sure to get subscribed if you aren't already. It really helps us out. As always though, we'll see you in the next GeekaWhat video.